all heard it, that tired, comfortable little phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It sounds liberating, doesn't it? Democratic, even, as if every glance, every preference is equally valid. But is it true? Or is it just a convenient lie we tell ourselves to avoid the harder, real truth that beauty is not subjective at all, but objective, and that what we call taste is often just the outward expression of how virtuous or not so virtuous that we all are? Think about it. When a man says he finds something beautiful, what is he really saying? That it pleases him, that it satisfies, for a moment, some appetite within him. But here's the problem. Not all appetites are equal. Some are refined, others are base. Some are cultivated through discipline and in the pursuit of virtue. Others are surrendered to, like pigs at a trough. So when we say beauty is subjective, what we're really admitting is that most people don't see beauty, they see desire. And desire, left unchecked, is a tyrant and we its slave. Take the man who stares only at what is crude, garish, obscene. His language and humor is that of base notions. Is his preference just as valid as the man who finds beauty in harmony, symmetry, grace? Of course not. His taste is not some noble individual truth. It's a type of confession. It reveals a man untrained, a mind enslaved to its own impulses, a soul void of goodness. Here is the truth we are too brainwashed to ignore. Beauty is not dictated by the beholder. It is revealed to him, but only if he has the eyes to see it. And how do we gain those eyes? Through virtue. Ultimately, through the holy sacrifice that is the Catholic Mass, but in daily practice, through virtue, through the mastery of our own passions rather than surrendering to them. The glutton calls a greasy feast beautiful because he's never disciplined his hunger. The lustful man mistakes degradation for beauty because he has never learned to love rightly. Their subjective preferences are not proof of beauty's relativity. They are proof of their own individual enslavement. So no, beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. It exists beyond us, above us, waiting to be recognized by those who have trained themselves to see it. And if we refuse to cultivate virtue, if we insist that our most base appetites define what is beautiful, then we are not free. We are prisoners of our own desires, mistaking our chains for liberation. The question then is not what do I find beautiful, but what have I become that I call this beautiful? And until we answer that, we will remain blind. And so now we are going to bring Paul into the conversation, and we're going to dive right into what it is to be objectively beautiful. So Paul, today as we talk about beauty, there's something that I've been thinking about as we've been preparing for today's conversation. And that is from I believe our first or maybe our second episode of Analog, where we have this notion of identifying the world around us. And part of that is having the concept of something. And when we look at reality, there is a part of the world where it's invisible, whether it be thoughts or it be spirit or God himself. And he, of course, holds the material realm within himself. But at the same time, it seems as though the two, they operate together, almost in a type of marriage of existence. And in order to fully embrace and optimally exist in the material, you have to recognize and see the immaterial as well. And I think that that's something that is very important to assess when discussing this notion of beauty and being objective beauty, and the fact that it really does exist. Am I landing the plane well on what I just said?
Yeah, there's all kinds of off ramps and runways that we can, landing strips we can land on and take off again from there. So one of the things that I think it's important, our mission with Analog, is to try to give the viewer the understanding of the full, complete nature, of reality, which includes the invisible, which includes the immaterial, the portions that are beyond our strictly animal senses, but they're within the grasp of our intellect, which itself is immaterial. And the problem is these days with the Cartesian mindset that we have, thanks to the John Dewey Enlightenment materialistic education that we've been given, and the strongly atheistic tendencies that it's led to. We're stuck. Many people's thought processes are stuck within the material realm, and frankly, that material realm is the realm of the machine. It's the realm of the digital machine, and it's the master. That machine, more or less, is in the material realm. It's a trap that we're trapped in, and we can't get out if we can't bring our minds out of and beyond, in other words, transcend this material realm, because our intellect and our soul is immaterial. So if we're stuck in a realm, and our thought processes and stuck in a realm, unfortunately, so many intellectuals, scientists, and etc. are very much stuck in the realm of this sensual, this sensation, phenomenal, materialistic realm. Then we're stuck, and we become easy prey for the machine. So my goal and our hope with Analog is to actually give the viewer the tools that they can actually, with their mind, they can transcend this material realm and move outside and beyond the capacity of the machine. And that's what we need to do. We need to be able to rise up. It's like quicksand. If we can't grab onto something else outside of the quicksand, we're going to sink in it and suffocate. So so you mentioned beauty, and beauty is not an opinion. This age-old saying of, well, it's not age-old, but that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, is to limit beauty to a subjective realm of the material realm, and it's the realm of opinion. And actual beauty is not an opinion. What is an opinion is what we find pleasure in. And what we find pleasure in is not necessarily beautiful.
Paul, real quick, of course, I want to bring to all of their viewers' attention the book, Mount Doom, The Prophecy of Tolkien Revealed. This is Paul's book that dives deep into the Tolkien legendarium of the Lord of the Rings and how it so beautifully points towards man's battle against the machine. That's why we named this program Analog. If you go to www.readmountdoom.com, again, that's www.readmountdoom.com, order yourself a copy, read maybe a chapter at a time, put it down. It is a little bit to chew on, but it is filled with wonderful information that speaks not only to, again, the legendarium of Tolkien's mythology, but also to the beauties of Catholic faith, the objective beauties, all things that are true, good, and beautiful, or in union. Again, you can go to www.readmountdoom.com. This book makes this program possible. Well, one thing that, when we were talking about this as a topic, Paul, with beauty and the subjective appreciation of certain things, is simply just how the individual, what they take pleasure in viewing. And I can't help but also think about, and I'm hoping that you can bridge the gap between these two thoughts. But beauty, if it's in the eye of the beholder, it's subjective. The individual, they take pleasure in whatever they take pleasure in. But then when you tie that, or you also consider the fact that we've also spent so many episodes talking about the need to cultivate virtue and to have a properly ordered appetite and appreciation of things that are properly ordered. And if we don't cultivate that, we become slave to vice. We become vicious in the true sense of the word, to where our appetites, they deviate more and more and more downhill. And so, in other words, if that keeps on happening and we become more and more slave to vice and to the flesh, then would it almost be fair to say that what we would find to be beautiful would be objectively more and more ugly, or less and less beautiful in the objective sense?
Yes, absolutely. Because what we do is we wind up, because of our appetites, because and our appetites are concupiscence. They're fallen concupiscibles with our fallen nature. We are able to make ourselves less and less beautiful when our the objective of our created nature is to make ourselves beautiful. And that's not just in a beautiful appearance. That's a different subject matter. It's to make ourselves beautiful in the cultivation of virtue, because those cultivations of virtue actually order us in the right order, where we're naturally and we're drawn toward our highest good. And our highest good is to return to good itself, and goodness itself is God, and particularly in the person of God the Father. He's the beginning and the end. He's the creator of heaven and earth, invisible and invisible. And we return to the Father. And so, what we do in our life with the cultivation of virtue is to make sure that our lives are completely, or as best we can, right ordered. And of course, the church gives us the necessary instruments that we need for healing when we go off track in the, for instance, the sacrament of confession, and the strength that we get too in the actual participation in the flesh and blood of God Himself. So all these things we have through the beauty of the church, thanks be to God, gives us everything that we need to transcend this material realm, enter into the immaterial, transcendent realm where the machine cannot go, and participate in actual beauty. And I think it's important that we lay out first what are there are transcendentals, and the transcendentals are the absolute nature of being itself. The highest being and the only true being is God, the Trinitarian God. And I think you'll find this interesting, and it'll become clear. Goodness is, we participate in goodness according to our capacity and our willingness to order our lives toward our highest natural created purpose and end, and that is to return to the goodness Himself in God the Father. Okay? So goodness is a transcendental property. The more we deviate from that, the more we pollute ourselves and pervert ourselves away from that end, the less good we are, and the more we introduce evil. So evil itself is the absence of the good. It's not an absolute positive thing. It's the absence of the goodness of God, the goodness of the Father in the Trinitarian sense. So we have to make sure that we don't introduce evil into our lives by deviating from our highest created purpose. Now, we're not perfect and we're going to fail on that. Fortunately, the church gives us the sacraments and the chance to reorder our lives and bring ourselves back into that alignment with our goodness. So that's our ultimate goal, is to reunite with goodness itself, who created us. The second transcendental property was also the Son, and that's in the Son of the Father, the second person in the Holy Trinity, and that is truth. So truth is absolutely transcendental. It transcends all of the material realm, and it transcends all of the immaterial realm, and the goodness itself coalesces in the Son. And then there's the other. So now we have goodness and truth, and those are two of the three transcendentals. Okay. Now, in the ancient times before Christ, Aristotle, Plato, and whatnot, the other one was called beauty. And it was in error in the fact that they saw beauty as the pleasure, it's something that gave pleasure to our senses, and you can automatically see that's not transcendental, and that's not true of all being. So the transcendentals have to be true of being itself. They transcend this realm. They are ultimately what everything else is contingent upon. So what the scholastics, at least in a roundabout way, or I've never actually read it, but they do actually bring in beauty is moved aside, and what takes its place is unity. So that's the third transcendental notion of the transcendentals, which there are only three, that all being has to participate in to be being itself, to be a being, is unity. It has to have discernible boundaries. It has to have limits. It can't just be bleeding into everything and we can't recognize it. It's got to be recognizable as a thing. So being and truth, being is truth, goodness, and unity. And ultimately, we can see very readily that those things are all most apparent and most actual in the Holy Trinity. And the unity, of course, is the relationship between Father and Son that unifies the Father and Son, and that is the Holy Ghost. So we can see that. And once we see that, it clarifies our mind, and we're able to participate in a transcendental, we're able to transcend this realm. In other words, rise above and out of it, even though our bodies can't necessarily rise out of this realm because we're made of perishable matter. So our bodies are stuck here more or less for the time being, for a time period of time, with the necessity of the soul to actually make the body a reality in this realm. But the soul dwells in both realms, this realm actually participating in the body in the perishable realm, but most thoroughly and forever in the immaterial realm, which transcends this material realm. So once we understand that, we can actually start to order ourselves to come into more and more actual being. And what we do is we become less and less machine-like. We pull ourselves out of the quicksand of this materialistic, atheistic, empirical attitude that we have toward creation, and we reunify the material and the immaterial. And the only place where that's reunified in reality is the human soul. And that's how the human being joins the material and the immaterial, is in the human soul. We are both material being and immaterial being. And we're the only beings that are like that. Angels are not immaterial and immaterial. They are strictly intellect. They are strictly immaterial. Animals are strictly material. They can't bridge the gap. Only human beings bridge the gap. And that's why Adam and Eve were the first made in the image of God to bridge the gap, to live in paradise, the Garden of Eden, where that was their natural home, which is the unification, the one place where the material and immaterial join.
You know, Paul, when you were talking about that, it made me recall a book that I've read quite a few times called The Last Four Things by Father Martin von, I'm going to butcher his last name. I know it's so bad. Cochem. But he discusses the last four things that are both personal to each individual, but also universal to all of mankind. And that's, of course, death, judgment, heaven, hell.
Mhm.
And we are talking about how the soul is the component that bridges the human person between the material and the immaterial realms. Father Martin talks about how the moment of death, where the soul leaves the body, is the most excruciating agony that the human person can ever experience. And it speaks to really how unnatural death is. Um, I don't know. I don't really have much of a question after that, but it's just it's food for thought. If anybody's ever never read The Last Four Things, I highly recommend it. It's pretty sobering.
Yeah.
But, you know, Paul, another thing that I wanted to talk about with you, and this is something we've touched on in the past, I know it's a topic that you are very well read in and very passionate about, but specifically the role that architecture plays in this union of the visible and invisible realms, and how it really can be a vertical resemblance and point towards God, you know, his existence and his goodness. And I wanted to ask you just plainly, you know, what is your view on the role that the traditional Catholic architecture within churches played in drawing a bridge between the notion of objective beauty, but also the material and the immaterial? And this is again before churches became giant like tuna cans with
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing on the walls, and all the beautiful paintings and mosaics were stripped out, and then
Yeah.
they were turned into
Iconoclasts. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and roll in all of art, which includes architecture, and I'll also include in that music and sculpture and painting and all of the ways that we express reality and we express that contact through the creation of beauty. So let's real quick, I'll explain the nature of beauty itself. The beautiful is the manifestation of all three of the transcendentals to the highest perfection humanly possible that we can actually create. We can create something. Let's just take a cathedral. We create a cathedral and a space. The whole idea of the cathedral is a space for transcendental activity. And that transcendental activity is the highest transcendent activity humanly possible, where we actually participate in a relationship with God Himself through the Mass. That's through the Holy Mass. And that's why, particularly, the traditional Latin Mass is under such pressure and under such persecution right now, even by, even by people who claim to be Catholic, who are modernists, who frankly really aren't Catholic at all. They're trying to destroy that. And the reason that they're trying to destroy that is because they are either evil in the fact that they have completely abandoned their necessity to reunite with the trueness of goodness, which is God beyond this realm, and they've invited nothing but the material realm to be their sole mission and their sole understanding, or they're ignorant and they don't know any better. It's probably a mixture of both. But we'll take the cathedral. The whole idea of the cathedral is with the music. Let's just take the cathedral with its highest activity, which is the Mass, the traditional worship of the Catholic Church, the Mass. And so what it's about, it's to create a space where we transcend this realm, because we are an experiential material person with sensation. It's supposed to give rise to our senses, particularly our eyes and our ears, but also our sense of smell, and that's the use of incense. And it's supposed to help us lead with our bodily senses, help lead our minds to transcend this realm. And it's with the music, and the music is supposed to be beautiful. It's supposed to transcend this reality. It's not supposed to be drums and saxophones and electric guitars. And,
What?
yeah,
Oh,
yep.
are you?
It's
That's
not.
earth shattering.
Oh, my comfort, my shelter.
I know. But it's supposed to elevate our minds. It's supposed to elevate our minds and our senses as the best we can above this realm, and then we participate in the actual perpetuation of the holy sacrifice on the cross, and we receive the living body and blood, true divinity of God Himself. And there is no greater analog act humanly possible than the participation in the sacrifice of the Mass. And we should make sure that we are trying to participate in that in a realm that gives us a created space, that gives us the best possible opportunity and chance of a transcendental experience. Yeah, we have to, once in a while. I mean, thank God there's lots of kids in the transcendental Mass. So we get a lot of crying, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And that'll oftentimes bring us back to the material world. But with a little practice, we can actually even transcend and take that as God's created nature, and that even the sounds of infants and children can actually help rise us, bring us, because that's generation, bring us out of this realm where the modernist notion, which is really just Protestant Freemasonry and the destruction of all things holy, all things transcendental. Ultimately, what the Freemasons and the Protestants want is heaven on earth, an experience limited to and riveted in the material realm, where we have no direct association with God, and we certainly don't have any association or any reception of the true body and blood of Christ on the cross. So when the building and the music are geared toward and deliberately fabricated, I will say, made subcreated by the human being to transcend this realm. You are participating in act, true act. You're leaving more and more of the potential realm, the perishable realm behind, and our souls and our minds are able to levitate, so to speak, a transcendental, quote unquote, experience out of, and we're able to join higher and higher with God. So we've got the music, we've got the beautiful architecture and the beautiful painting, sculpture, the beauty of that surrounds us, that gives pleasure, should give pleasure to our eyes. If you're a good person, it will give you pleasure to your eyes. If you're not a good person, it'll actually be offensive, and it will give you pain. The same thing with the music. So our ears are elevated above this, and then the incense too. The incense we actually can smell, and the smell is so powerful. And that's what brings us, and we're able to transcend this realm and then join with Christ, who is actually joined with us. God is joined with us through the incarnation. He's both human and divine in one person, two natures in one person.
Paul, I've always kind of thought of it as almost a type of mystery, and maybe you can provide some clarity on it. But at least speaking anecdotally for myself, when I find myself at Mass, most especially, the traditional Latin Mass, and you have all of those different things going on. You have the beautiful church, you have the appreciation of seeing friends and family in full pews, and you can smell the incense and you can hear the beautiful choir, and you find yourself in deep prayer and conversation with God. It's all of these things are happening that are stimulating the various senses, but at the same time, and this is what's been so almost like a mystery to me, you feel completely at peace and calm, and I don't want to say at one, but there's a simplicity to it. You're not overly stimulated. There's this harmonious relationship between all of these different parts of attending that Mass that you would think typically, like, oh, you can smell this and that's beautiful, and then you can hear the music and your mind's racing, but in reality it's much more calming than that, which has always been fascinating to me as a topic and also just as an experience in general. Am I landing the plane
Yeah,
well in what I'm
absolutely.
trying
Yeah,
to
yeah,
say?
you're piloting very well. I would say that that's because it's not distracting. It actually, all those things are deliberately liturgically designed. The rubrics, the everything that goes on is designed to bring you into sharper and sharper focus with the ultimate simplicity. And the ultimate simplicity is God himself.
The ultimate unity.
The ultimate unity. He's the ultimate simplicity. He has no parts. He has persons. And there's distinctions, there's not divisions. So the scholastic philosopher makes distinctions. He doesn't make separations. He doesn't separate things from their natural unifying essences. He only abstracts enough for the mind to understand the nature of some aspect of something, but he doesn't just completely abstract one thing and deny everything else that is maybe even this one thing is contingent upon. And that's a big mistake that modern science does. That's one of the reasons that they'll remain, when you remain in that modern scientific, which science, by the way, is just, um, let's see, it's just the systematized knowledge of any object of thought. So, science is a very overused and underappreciated word. Science is just scio, from the Latin scio, I know. It's just human knowledge. So I think what you're saying is, it seems like all these things, all this beauty and everything else is just absolutely swarming our senses. You think we'd be distracted more. And we're not, because they're all pointing toward the good. They're all pointing toward our ultimate highest created purpose. And while we're in this realm and we're living beings, body and soul, in the substantial unity of the human being, we are drawn, the one place that we can most thoroughly be drawn into this true relationship with God is at the Mass. So it's kind of like a funnel. It funnels our focus and funnels everything into that relationship and that experience at the Mass. Now, the Mass doesn't replace the necessity and the beauty of personal prayer, and that's very, very important. And that's when we're not in church necessarily, although we may be at church and we can actually have personal prayer too while we're attending the Mass. But the personal prayer, maybe it's, in the evening or in the morning or whenever we make our personal prayer, say the rosary or whatever. That too, we're trying to bring everything together, to bring our senses and order our psychology so we can have a very poignant focus on God. And that's really the nature of the mysteries of the rosary. They're to try to get us to focus on something deliberate, something beautiful and valuable that we can focus on. And it helps us kind of push out all the interference that we have in our daily lives that ordinarily anybody who's said the rosary very much knows that it's very difficult to keep out a lot of the distractions that we're, even if we're in a place of peace, we're still distracted by the activity of our minds. So if we can focus our mind on that mystery, whatever it is, the glorious mysteries, there or the any of the mysteries of the rosary, that's what that personal prayer does. So our activity in the Mass and all the things that come together that give us a disposition, a psychological disposition to be in the best possible place to participate in the holy sacrifice of the Mass, which is the highest analog experience in the created world that we can experience. And that's why it's so punished by the digital age. The everything should be pointed at that. And anytime we distract ourselves, or we build churches, or we play terrible distracting music, or whatever it is, we reduce our transcendental and the transcendent experience, and it tears it down to a more of an earthly experience, which is very Protestant. It's not Catholic.
So, Paul, we've probably got 2 or 3 minutes left. And, in closing, there's this question that I would like to address. And I have my take on the answer to this question. And I'm hoping that after I give mine, that we can close out the episode with yours. And, the question is, how does one begin to be more receptive and appreciative of objective beauty? For me, the way that I think and look at the situation, I have to look at the three phases of the spiritual life. There's the purgative phase, the illuminative phase, and then there's the unitive phase. And if in essentially what those three things are for the viewer, the purgative phase is when the soul finally has had enough in their pursuit of goodness that they choose to get rid of, to purge all of the evil, all of the sin around them and in their life and in their habits. In other words, the moral life is like it's like a vacuum. When something leaves, something else is going to suck right in and fill that void. So if you have a life that is an absence of good, well, then of course we're just going to embrace evil. And again, not as maybe a net positive as you were mentioning earlier, Paul, but the first step in embracing objective beauty is to purge oneself of all of the deviances of the world and to master one's own habits and passions. And only then can one take the first step to appreciating what is objectively beautiful. And then eventually only appreciating that which is the face of God and God himself.
And the beatific vision.
In the beatific vision, which on earth and moving towards heaven, of course, would be considered the unitive phase. Now, what would be your answer as we wrap up? How does one begin to grow an appreciation of objective beauty?
Well, you can't really appreciate anything unless you understand it. That's why the nature of love is a knowledge, as Aquinas says. Love is a knowledge. Sometimes it has a feeling pleasant associated with it, but it's a knowledge. So if we love something, truly love something, we can truly appreciate it. So we can't appreciate something that we don't understand. So I think our first mission and it's the mission of our analog, this program, this channel, is to help people understand how they go about acquiring that appreciation, how they go about acquiring that knowledge. And if we don't know what if we don't know what beauty is, and we're stuck in this error that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, which nothing could be less true. That makes ourselves God, as if we are being itself, and we're not. We're not. We can that all that is an expression of our appetites, for better or for worse. So what we really have to do is we have to understand what beauty is. And beauty is objectively is when the transcendentals come together in their most pure form and they touch the earth in the material realm, you have beauty. And it does that in the traditional worship of the Mass, where God comes down, the being himself comes down on the altar, and we have actual being on the altar. And that's beautiful. That's the highest created beauty that we can experience. Now, if we were looking at something that's beautiful in music, for instance, if it participates in that and music is toward the good, the highest good, then it's beautiful.
Well said. That's it for this episode of Analog. Of course, if you like what you see, please comment your thoughts down below, like the video, share it with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed to Mabel Media, please do so right now. And with that said, this has been this latest episode of Analog with Joe and Paul.